good evening from wherever you're joining. Welcome to another session of Green Road webinar series. I'm Ritu Mishra from ADB Transport Sector Group. I'll be moderating today's session. Today's session will cover integrating water and land management into road development for enhanced resilience. This session will also highlight the third dimension of Green Road as presented in the newly developed Green Roads Toolkit. And just for your info, Green Roads Toolkit will be launched during the Transport Forum, which is being held from 14th to 17th of May. And after that, it will be publicly available in the ADB website for your use. As we all know that the development of roads have far-reaching impacts on the environment, including climate resilience, landscape preservation, and hydrological systems. And the traditional construction practices we have been using for road construction has led to severe environmental impacts like landslide, flooding, waterlogging, etc. Therefore, to enhance resilience, we need to integrate innovative approaches in the design and construction of roads. So today our speaker will discuss the essential integration of water and land management in the road development for enhanced resilience. Further, he will provide us an overview of innovative approaches and best practices to integrate water and land management into road development. With this, let me quickly introduce our today's speaker. Our speaker is Dr. Frank Ban. Frank is a technical director of Meta. He has worked extensively in the field of green roads in collaboration with various organizations, such as World Bank and ADB. For ADB, he has contributed to the decarbonization strategy for the transport sector and is currently working for the development of Green Road Toolkit. And for the World Bank, he's the key author of flagship publication, which is Green Roads for Water, Guideline for Road Infrastructure in Support of Water Management and Climate Resilience. Now, before I hand over to Frank to start his presentation, quick house rules. Your microphones will be muted unless you are invited to speak. Please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll pick up them and direct to Frank to respond. Or alternatively, you can raise your hand after the presentation, and we will unmute your phone and ask you to speak. So with this, over to you, Frank.
Thanks, Rita. I'm happy to have this occasion to speak today. Let me go to my presentation. Yeah. So last week, 2 weeks ago, in the third presentation in this Green Roads webinar series, Gordon Keller talked about climate resilience and a little bit from the perspective of the road, how to make sure the road stands up to all the new challenges that we have with climate change and also the old challenges, of course. That was also very much focused on making sure the road keeps functioning. Today, as you want to go a little bit further, because roads are an essential part of the environment around them, the landscape around them, and how can we optimize, both the road connectivity functions and the functions in land and water management. So what I would like to do today is, Rita already gave a very brief introduction to the work on the green roads. I would like to pay a little bit of attention of the importance of green roads and the vision and that we've developed jointly with all the people on the logo here, the ADB, Meta, our organization, part of GOPA Group, and International Road Federation. And then also to dive deeper into what are green roads, and particularly, of course, what is land and water management for climate resilience and beneficial, purposes around the road for the people living there. And we'll sort of zoom in also to different elements of the toolbox. So why is this really important? Why green roads so important? Because there's going to be a lot of work, and you all know it, I guess, in the audience of this webinar. There's a lot of investment in new roads, and also in maintaining and upgrading existing roads, because we still have a connectivity gap in Asia and the Pacific, with 400 million people not having access to all-weather roads. And the estimate of the ATO, the Asian Transport Outlook, which is really a rich source of data, estimates that in this decade, 8 million kilometers of roads will be built. So that's adding almost 30% in Asia and the Pacific. Yeah? And the finance involved in all of this is important. So if we all focus on the other functions of roads, I think we will, apart from the connectivity and the road safety, we can do a tremendous job, because the road sector is a major factor in carbon emissions, 18% of the global CO2 emissions. And, either from the high mountains or the coastal areas and everything in between, the roads change the hydrology of the landscape. Yeah. And that has many different manifestations. But we need to take that into account and try to make it into a positive. Yeah. Road change local climates, they affect the wind, the temperature, the moisture. Yeah. And again, we should try to turn it into a positive. Roads affect biodiversity. Yeah. It's the second cause of wildlife kills, but biodiversity is more than just mammals, and it's also the insects, the invertebrates. And again, we should minimize the damage and, as much as possible, turn this into a positive. Roads have an important effect on the quality of life, public health, dust, heat, noise. Yeah. Because there's an estimate that at least 10 million healthy life years are lost in Asia annually because of road noise. It just shows you all these figures of the importance of roads. Another one is that if you look at construction material that is used globally, 30 to 40% of the construction material, that's an estimate from ORIS, is used for making new infrastructure. So what we would like to do today is also try to see with relatively small measures, but probably a lot of alertness and clever thoughts, how we can turn roads into positive instruments for land and water management. And this fits into the Green Roads vision for Asia that we've developed. That Green Roads will foster beneficial land and water use, reduce pollution, support restorative and regenerative ecosystems, enhance safe and affordable mobility of people, to deliver inclusive, low carbon, resilient development, and environmentally considered outcomes in Asia and the Pacific. So, yeah, roads, because of their size, they have this responsibility, and everybody involved in the sector. So Rita already introduced briefly the Green Roads Toolkit. So what the Green Roads Toolkit does, it looks at additional dimensions, of roads. So with the regular road, connectivity, safety, affordability of transport are really very important things, and these are always very important things. But we have additional dimensions that we should look at. The decarbonization was mentioned already. The climate resilience, with Gordon also presented on the 4th of April. What we discussed today, water and land development. And then the other issues, reducing pollutions, improving the quality of life, preserving biodiversity, disaster preparedness. We all know the images that after a flood, you'll see people stranded on the roads as their place of rescue, but also sustainable sourcing and fostering inclusive growth, and all the synergies between them. So this is, in a nutshell, what is in the Green Roads Toolkit, and also what is very much in the vision for Green Roads. Now, let's look at the impact on land and water. Now, so traditionally, and I have to say my background is also in water management. People from the road sector said we only have three major enemies in the road sector, and that is water, and the second one is also water, and the third one is water as well. So this has always been the, the experience and the thinking, that roads are very much affected by the hydrology, and it's a major source of damage, particularly on unpaved roads and rural roads, but even on highways. So, but we need to turn this around, yeah. So yes, roads cause, because also it's not only that roads are damaged by water, but the other way around, the area around roads, yeah, is also very much damaged by, the presence of roads. Roads cause flooding, they cause waterlogging, they cause erosion, yeah. So, you know, and because of this very intense relation, yeah, it is also possible to turn it around. They are very much connected. So let's make it a positive connection, yeah. And that's what we want to show here, because that will bring us three major benefits, yeah, if roads become green roads. And the major benefits in terms of water management and roads would be a reduced maintenance cost and less downtime of roads, um, but also reduced degradation of the landscape around the roads. And thirdly, very importantly, make beneficial use of water around the roads for the communities living along the roads, for instance, water harvesting through the road infrastructure. And in this presentation, I think we'll give a lot of examples of this. So in Meta, and we're now part of GOPA, we have been working on this for quite some time now. We started 7-8 years ago, been supported by several organizations and supporting different organizations to systematically promote the use of roads for water management, regreening, and climate resilience. And our hope is that this by 2030 will be introduced in half of the countries in the world. And this work is really good on progress, and some of the examples we can show you are the results of this work. Yeah. So we do this by doing scoping studies, capacity building, helping in the designs, changing the procedures and the guidelines, and also helping to mobilize funds. And I think there's a good development that the first GCF project for roads, green roads, is now also approved. So yeah, we're really excited to work with the team of Michael and ADB to sort of give shape to this new future of roads. Like I said, the investment is high, road expansion is there, yeah. It's a lot of negatives now, which can be turned into positives. And the other message here is that the cost of doing this, of making the additions, is not so high. And you can do this on existing roads as well. It's not only for new roads, yeah, but you can also basically retool existing roads. So what I would like to do now is just to give a lot of examples. And this is actually really now, we are now sort of descending into the toolkit, yeah, where we've identified 8 intervention areas under this important element of green roads. So one is to use roads for water harvesting and runoff storage. The other one is to use roads directly into agricultural water management, for groundwater management, to reduce waterlogging, to prevent landslides, to do erosion and gully control, to avoid sand dune movement, and also to go for green routing. So what we would like to do now is to share examples of all these practices. There's more in the tool kit, all to be revealed in the Asian Transport Week in May. But please contact us if you have already issues, questions, we really, always very eager to work on this topic. So the first theme, for instance, is water harvesting and runoff storage. So if you look at what is possible, and what can be easily implemented, these are the sort of things we should think of: floodwater spreaders, along road surfaces, directing water from the roads to where they can be used beneficially, for instance, ponds, infiltration ditches, to do proper diversion of water from culverts and road drainage, have infiltration structures which are fed from road drainage, have surface storage fed from road drainage, can be several things, and also using roads as reservoir embankments. So creating basically a reservoir with the road embankment as part of the structure. So an example of this toolbox is, for instance, flow diversion from culverts and road drainage. What is really important, and you see it on the picture, is that when the water gets out of the culvert, rather than it sort of playing havoc with the landscape, one creates V-shaped structures so the water spreads gently and it goes to places where it can either infiltrate into the groundwater, or it can feed some surface storage. What's really important is that, of course, the culvert should be properly placed. And there's a lot of, and we already saw it last week, 2 weeks ago with Gordon's presentation. Culvert is so, simple, but it has so many important dimensions. So this also applies for the water management you can do with culverts. So where do you plan them, or what do they look like, is very important. Here also, on the right side of the slide, you see a little bit how the toolbox is structured. So there are visuals in it, and there are references in it. There's description of it. There's also description of the cost and benefits, and then also where is this practice most applicable, and what is also needed to make it work. Because it's not only the engineering, it's also sometimes the standards, the capacity building. These are very important things, and I think increasingly so also within the ADB, where with the climate agenda, the emphasis is very much on including these measures in the programs as well. Another one is to have infiltration structures fed from the road drainage. So alongside the road, there's many opportunities to channel the runoff to infiltration ponds or infiltration trenches. And the important thing here to say is something which is often leads to sometimes confused. It's not actually the water that runs on the road surface, and that's not the issue. The thing is that the road is a major landscape element. It is like an embankment, so it really changes the whole hydrology in the landscape. So what is important is to make use of that element of roads being embankment or sometimes a drain, and then guide water with the roads, to infiltration trenches, infiltration ponds. So this is another example. And of course, the slope, the soil conditions, the permeability are all important factors. But it basically, allows you to get rid of the water that's running along the road in a beneficial way. This is just another example. We can also have the water go to surface storages, to open ponds. There's an example here in the middle of the image from Portugal, where the road embankment was really guiding the water to a temporary storage reservoir during rainy period, and the water would be available for livestock for a couple of months after the rainy period. Yeah, and this is really important in semi-arid areas where you cannot really, in arid areas where really you cannot allow to waste water, or and not reuse it. Yeah, but also in some areas it is good because it is these can be areas which are have a recreational value. The other thing is that the road itself can be part of a reservoir. Yeah, so there are several examples where the road body itself is an integral part of the road reservoir. Yeah, sometimes the embankment is already there and the road crosses it, but also, for instance, Burkina Faso, it has been done in a very systematic way that the road embankment was armored, of course, to make sure it's not affected and it's not damaged by the water standing next to it. And also vegetation is added. And then with that, water can be retained in the landscape, and you create all sort of small reservoirs. Then another a very important example. So far, I think some of the examples were more from arid and semi-arid areas where water harvesting is really, key to resilience, to prosperity of farmers. But another example is in lowlands, particularly in coastal lowlands. What you can also do with the roads is they can manage the water levels around for the agriculture in the rural areas. And this is a very simple intervention from Bangladesh, yeah, where actually what happened in Bangladesh in the last I would say 10 years, new rice varieties have developed for these coastal areas. So these are rice varieties that yield tremendously more benefit and also have a shorter duration. So you can grow a second crop after you've harvested this new rice variety. It's a rainy rice variety, but you need to do some water management because sometimes you need to drain the land, apply some fertilizer. Sometimes you need to have water standing on the land to control some pests. So how do you do that in these areas? And that is actually the answer is with the local roads, because the roads are already there and they also compartmentalize and they sort of create small, blocks of paddy fields. And then by adding gates to the culverts on the roads, you can, release water from the paddy fields when it's required, or retain water on the paddy fields when it is required. And this has made an enormous change in the coastal areas. These new varieties combined with such water management measures, such as the gated culverts. Yeah. Another important application is on again in pastoralist areas. So we haven't covered that one yet. Yeah. But in pastoralist areas, again, what we see in many pastoralist areas is that the pressure on the land resources are really high. It's overgrazing, so you can try to control that by controlling grazing, but also you can control it by creating more sources of fodder. So again, we've worked on that in Kenya and Ethiopia. If you have the water that runs through the culverts and you sort of collect it and grow fodder along these culvert outlets, you really increase the availability of fodder for the livestock, and you are able to retain the viability of the grazing lands much longer. And of course, it takes several measures. You need to make sure there's no access issues, because not everybody in pastoralist communities, people don't like people to migrate to the area to sources of fodder. you also need to think of, again, you turn this fodder into hay. What fodder grasses to use? Usually it's the native fodder grasses because they are adapted to the environment. So there's a lot of additional measures that make this successful, but they're all very doable, and we've seen that these are interventions that once started and get replicated easily. Another area is to reuse the stormwater along the roads in the cities. So far we don't want the rural areas, yeah? But many cities, we were working in Amman, for instance, and you see that a lot of the water is really scarce in Jordan, and they have an amazing system of managing water, blending water. But one important source of water is also the runoff from the urban water areas. And so if we can reuse the storm water, make it useful for low value uses, maybe do some light treatment, or put it to purposes where the quality norms are, of course, not so strict. For instance, for wetland restoration, and this is what's being done in Barcelona, where the runoff from the urban area is used to keep the wetlands around the city, alive. Yeah. And this, of course, boosts tourism. I mean, it has an enormous economic value. It makes the life more pleasant for people living in the city. And also it helps the biodiversity as well. So I will skip this one for time's sake. It's similar to the other one. Another one is in the areas, in the mountain areas. So here we have another challenge. The challenge here is that if we make roads through mountain areas, one of the things we do is that we open up the springs. We open up the small aquifer systems, which bury the water, yeah, which contain the water in these areas. And by making the roads, we sort of open them up in so many places. So there is a big risk that these springs will start to leak, yeah. These aquifer systems start to leak, and this is one of the factors in the high altitude areas where you see a lot of springs drying up, and there's several reasons. There's also sometimes a change in land use, the climate change, but also the unknown destruction, yeah, which is caused by making roads and not being aware that with this also we change the aquifers. So it's really important to identify and understand the aquifer systems and the spring sheds before road construction, and include measures for protecting the spring sheds with the road construction. This you can, for instance, do if you make a road. You always have the rubble from the road, particularly mountain areas, and this can also be used for retaining water. And then also install spring boxes, yeah, to safeguard the source, yeah, and to make sure people have access to it in a safe and equitable way. So if you do like this, then you don't damage the resorts. We are working on this now in Nepal, working with the local government to really see how we can make this part of the road development programs, so that also we don't only develop the roads, but also we develop the springs that are opened up with the road development. Another category is the basically is the use of the road crossings. Yeah, so in many rural areas, the road crossings are in the shape of fence and road drifts, and these can also be used to retain water behind them. Yeah, and this is important that we design the road drift in a proper way, not with fence, not with culverts, yeah, but just as a structure which, doesn't have any openings, but the water is sort of taken from the lower section with enough, uh, you know, extension of the road and wing walls to make sure the road doesn't get bypassed, the fence doesn't get bypassed. So this is another example, and it's very common now in Kenya that roads in rural areas have non-vented drifts, which act then as a sender. Because what happens, and this is something that I think people who've been driving in such areas will notice, that often the vegetation upstream of the road is very rich, downstream is not so rich. This is because the road, you can see it in this picture, basically retains packages of sediment, and that sediment has the ability to store water. So you basically create a small water source upstream of the road with the non-vented drift. And in many areas, this is vital for so many different purposes for local water supply and agriculture. Again, it's an example of a measure that doesn't cost any money, but it requires attention to detail. The other important factor in this, again, is the whole link between roads and cross drainage and water logging. Yeah. Again, what is very important is to make sure there's adequate cross drainage, yeah, to prevent water logging along the roads. Yeah. And also be careful about if you have a bridge and use a bridge sill, yeah, or the culvert, yeah, that the base of the bridge sill or the culvert, that basically determines whether the water can go freely or whether it has a sort of natural blockage. And I've seen it in Bangladesh where a bridge sill is too high and then the whole area suffers from drainage congestion, from water logging. So it is really important to have sufficient cross drainage, not for the road, yeah, only, yeah, but very much for the landscape around the roads. In Bangladesh, there's a practice sometimes to save money on the cross drainage when a road is constructed and put all the money in the road construction. But then what you see is you have massive waterlogging. We worked in one polder in Bangladesh, polder 26, and the damage, if you calculate it, because of the lost production and the waterlogging cost, because the road was impeding all the cross drainage, was in the order of $1 to $2 million for that area. And to remove it, to unblock it, it was costing you something like, $650,000 to $70,000. So that's a good example that we should not be penny wise and dollar foolish in economic terms. Another example also of the link, between roads and the larger areas is the catchment management. So we need to make sure that areas which are prone to landslides, that we manage the water properly, that there's enough drainage, yeah, to prevent the saturation of soils, and that we also avoid water retention in sensitive areas. And we mentioned that often roads have this sort of potential to retain water, but in areas which are unstable, we should not do that. Yeah, but rather we should also stabilize these areas with deep-rooted vegetation. Yeah, and restore also at the same time the indigenous slow-growing vegetation to mitigate the landslide risk. So there's a lot of landscape measures, land measures in this case, yeah, to increase the stability of the road, and this is ever more important with changing rainfall patterns. That's quite obvious. Yeah, we can also be even more proactive in this field of soil stabilization by doing something which is a fantastic practice, but it's not yet in all the places where it should be. This is the soil bioengineering, where you plant vegetation, live stakes, retaining structures, you vegetate reinforced soil slopes, along the road. This bioengineering, soil bioengineering was developed in Nepal. It has spread to some countries, including the US, Kazakhstan, but myself, I was in Tajikistan for the Green Road Toolkit about a month ago, and you can also see very big opportunities in a country like Tajikistan for the soil bioengineering. But it's not yet commonly used. The knowledge is not there. The people working on forestry are not into it, and the people working on roads are not into it either. So, but if it's introduced, it's a very cost-effective measure compared to hard structures. I've also seen images recently from a good friend of mine showed me from Georgia, where they tried with sort of thin concrete to protect the slopes, and it looks ugly, and it also doesn't work. So there's a lot of scope for such cost-effective measures, which also look much more attractive, which help biodiversity, etc., etc. But there's a skill to it, and this skill has, fortunately, it's available. It's been developed. There's people really know how to do it, but there should be more people who are doing it and who know how to do it. Also with the landscapes is importance of gully control and stabilization. Once a gully develops, it is really difficult to stabilize. It can be done, So the road can also be used to basically stabilize in areas which are sensitive, to create structures which stop the gully from developing upstream. But then, of course, you should also make sure that the water that comes out of the cross drainage, out of the culverts or bridges, that is, check dams that make sure that the landscape doesn't get eroded. Oh, sorry. This was, and just another one just to mention is that we can also do hydro seeding or use jute netting and geotextile in certain areas to stabilize the slopes around the roads. Again, the techniques are available, and that's also why the toolkit is developed. The toolkit doesn't have any, most of the things are time tested in certain places. However, they haven't spread to many other places where they could be used. The last two topics I want to discuss also is the link between roads and sand dune movement. I remember being in Sudan, and the road to Port Sudan was just a straight line in north-south direction. And, it was basically creating a massive wind tunnel. So the construction of the road really triggered the sand dunes in this sort of desert area. So the sand dunes really started to move because the wind was all the time blowing along the road and was sort of triggering and destabilizing the sands of the deserts, and the dunes just started to, be all over the place. So we need to choose routes in low-risk sand dune movement areas, based on proper assessment. We can use GIS and remote sensing for this, and then we can align roads to the prevailing wind directions, make them curve or make them less curves. And in the areas which are most sensitive to sandstorms, we should really consider how we sort of get across these areas. And the second practice is also very much based on that. Because also in many countries, like Mongolia, you are going to build roads in such areas, so you need to know how to do it. So one thing, additional measure, is to do windbreaks and soil stabilization along the roads. There's really good examples from China, where sand fixing belts and sand blocking belts were, built along the roads to prevent this movement of sands. There can also be mechanical measures like sand fences, in a checkboard pattern to fix the shifting of the sand dunes. Then these biological measures that I mentioned, and you have to make sure they are perpendicular to the wind direction, and of course adopted to the local climate and the species that do well. Sometimes you can consider some additional irrigation to kickstart the vegetation. Some vegetation, is able to do very well within these sort of dry, sandy, and windy environments. And again, this vegetation has a benefit on its own. I think that is in general what we see with roadside vegetation. It has so many purposes, apart from, in this case, avoiding the encroachment of sand on the roads, but it is for biodiversity, it is for water retention, it's for beauty, also not important, local microclimate, etc., etc. So many reasons to put much more attention to the vegetation along the roads, and in this case with windbreaks. So this was really sort of quick dive into the toolbox. Like I mentioned, and I think some of you are probably already in this meeting because you're part of the community of practice that we really hope is going to develop more. And we really would like you to join. I think a lot of the things that are in the toolbox really come from people making an effort and being relatively successful. So we really would like to keep moving along with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank. Very insightful presentation. And with the cases and examples you have shown, we can see how the green roads can make actually these transformative impacts within the society, within the road network as well. So it was very, very eye-catching as well as very helpful to understand the linkage between roads, land, water management, and everything. So with these, I have requesting all our participants to put their questions in the Q&A box, or you can just raise your hand and then we will unmute your microphone and invite you to to ask your questions or comments. I can see some of the questions in the Q&A box. So we have one question for you, Frank. How green roads will be climate resilient towards net zero pathway by 2050, addressing water management?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know whether it's a question or it's a statement. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be more like a battle cry. I think we need to start working on it more and more, basically. And I think already there's a big shift. When I think we started with the Green Roads for Water program, at less than 10 years ago, it was fairly uncharted territory, and now in many countries it's happening. But I think what is important, and maybe that's a good answer to this question. One thing is the practice, and I showed a lot of these practices, But to make this practice happen, other things have to change as well. So one, I think, is the sort of mindset or the sort of perspective, of people working on roads or people who work alongside roads. Can be agriculture people, can be watershed people, to make the link between the road and the environment around it. And I think that, my background is also very much in water management. Water management people focus on water. They don't focus on the roads. But then, if you realize the investment going into roads, we always said that, if we add 5% of water to all the roads, we will do a much better job in water management than we would do with anything else. So I think that's the other thing. So it's a mindset thing. But then I think the next step also, it is the consolidation of the practices in guidelines, in designs, in standard designs, in bills of quantity. If a road is built and there's no provision, for instance, for roadside vegetation, because it was just not part of the budget, then we miss an enormous opportunity. So I think that's another important part. And I think also that's why I really, think ADB's approach of what is called type B projects, adding these measures to all your climate portfolio is so important, because otherwise we just do a nice thing, yeah, but we don't change the system. And I think also changing the system is also not so difficult. It's not a revolution which we are causing. It's a sort of, nice easing into a better future.
Thank you, Frank. So we also have one comment. It's relating to Bangladesh. So I'll just go through the comment and you can comment on it. In Bangladesh, designing drainage is not a challenge, but it is that even if a good drainage system is designed, it has very little chance of maintaining its functionality due to lack of maintenance and repairs, especially in market areas, which makes the design of roads that are less sensitive to water-induced damage an interesting option.
Yeah, true. No, I fully think that is no, it's very much of turning a negative into a positive. So if the drainage, and the road culvert is not just there, yeah, but it's also there because it helps the agriculture, or it helps the reuse of water. There will be an incentive to keep it alive. And I think this is also in some road maintenance programs, particularly in we're not talking about now about highways, but just the rural roads, the unpaved roads. If the people who have the task to, check the roads and make sure there's no blockage of a drain and all this type of, or the roadside drains are not sort of damaged. But if they're also part of, either directly or part of the community that benefits from the beneficial uses of this, road drainage, then I think we have a much better chance to address this really, difficult problem always of maintenance.
Well, thanks, Frank. But this comment leads to one of my question as well. So how can we ensure long-term maintenance and management of green road features to uphold their ecological integrity and function? Are there any strategies or any
Yeah.
kind? Yeah.
No, I think it's a good question, Rita. I think it is, one is to make it explicit, because if we don't realize, that this is happening, that these benefits are there, then we cannot sort of, have the arrangements, yeah, there. But I think a really good example, again, we go to Bangladesh, is the program of roadside vegetation in Bangladesh. And still, there's still some way to go, but I think Bangladesh, in terms of coverage, yeah, road coverage with, proper beneficial roadside vegetation, Bangladesh is ahead of many, many other countries. So here, for instance, in Bangladesh, they have a system that, the roadside verges are planted, and this is a sort of partnership between the forestry department and the communities. And there are rules that for 10 years, the community can have the beneficial use of the trees. They can take the leaves for fodder, or the fruits, or the, small things for timber or for fuel wood or whatever. Yeah. But they protect it, they maintain it. Yeah. And then after 10 years, when the trees are ready to harvest and also should be renewed, then the benefit is shared. And it's a proper formula according to social forestry rules. certain percentage going to the communities, certain percentage going to the government, certain percentage goes for a road forestry fund, which then funds the replanting of it. So I think we need to think of such measures to capture these things, so make sure that they really become a benefit, and a benefit in the hands of the right people, and in a fair way as well. Yeah.
Well, so we also have another question from Bangladesh, I think. How should we reconcile the two conflicting tasks of reducing the water table under pavement formation and water harvesting or agriculture water management? The conflict between different water management targets and the large gap between the objectives of interconnected sectors like transport, agriculture should be recognized and addressed.
Yeah, this is really a very important question. Yeah, because it's not that you should blindly do a lot of water harvesting along the roads, and then you find the roads become soggy and whatever. I think it's really important to strike the balance. Yeah, and I think in striking the balance, um, to protect the integrity of the road is really important. Yeah, because if the road collapses, then everything is lost. So the answer is every area has its own uh, best solution. How to balance the different things in certain areas. You should uh, should be careful. I mean, like for instance, areas which are, of course, prone to landslides. If you retain too much water along the roads, this will be disastrous. Yeah. But also in Bangladesh, we are working with the World Bank, looking at the 5 different, major areas in Bangladesh, and to sort of see what are the best matches. But then even then, locally you have to decide what is the best match. And but I think also you should turn it around. Yeah, because if you don't take into account the water management around the road, yeah, it's not only for what we said, there are 3 benefits, because if we don't deal with it, the roads also will be destroyed. Yeah. And I remember when we started a couple of years ago in Ethiopia, people from the Ethiopian Roads Authority were quite skeptical because of this reason. Yeah. So then we went and we just looked at a lot of places. So you had a big gully which was created, yeah, because of the road. Yeah. And this could have turned into something positive, because with a V-shaped thing, it would spread the water. But then also what everybody realized, if you see this gully, which is downstream of the culvert of the road, gullies always climb up, and ultimately they will they will get to the road as well. So you see, that's where the win-win is tremendous.
Yeah. Well, this discussion leads to my follow-up question. So, I would like, is there any kind of monitoring and evaluation measures that should be implemented to assess the success of land and water integration in green road projects?
Yeah, I think yes, I think so. I think we need to also make the planning much more systematic. Uh, Ourselves, but I won't say that it's only ourselves. I'm sure there are more people working on. But I think actually, let's just put the first thing. One thing which I gave a lot of practices, yeah, and to show what can be done. But it all starts with a proper assessment, yeah, leaving aside monitoring and evaluation, but a proper assessment of the whole landscape and the hydrology, and the needs for the road construction, to make that sort of one proper thing. Then I think the second thing is the monitoring, because I think often what happens if you build something, yeah, you can't predict everything. I think often a sort of second round of adaptations, yeah, is really important. If you construct anything, a highway, a rural road, or yeah, you will find out later, there are certain things that you couldn't know, or you didn't know, or you overlooked, yeah, and you can correct and to prevent damage and make use of positive opportunities. So I think, yes. So, and I think the first thing to do is what we've also been doing is basically transact surveys. Just drive along the road, yeah, and note down every area where something happens. It's very simple, actually. It's not rocket science. We don't need any satellites for that. We just need our eyes and and our little notebook and and just see what's happening. But I think it should be part of the practice of in road construction and road maintenance to do that, because I think also in road maintenance you need to not just to make sure that whatever is damaged is repaired, but then you see the next year it's again damaged because of that there was some defect in the way it was constructed. Yeah, so I think you should, if you do the maintenance, you should always sort of say, okay, how can we make sure that's now resolved and like I say, and if possible used in a beneficial way.
Thanks, Frank. We have number of questions coming up. So we have another comment. The comment is another issue is that road agencies, especially in South Asia, do not have the authority to intervene among the right of way, while other sectors and organizations do not have the mandate of road development. So here, it is mainly adaptation and coping with the reality that water is and will remain a present stressor. Would love to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, no, I know this issue, and again, for instance, in Bangladesh, for the main highways, yes, the road authorities have the right of way, but for the smaller roads, they don't actually. So it's really important to be aware of this, and I think the answer is that you need to work together with either local government, yeah, or with communities themselves to address this issue. But it is quite interesting, and what I find also interesting is that this right of way issue, that's what we find in our work. You can't find, for instance, a systematic record, yeah, what's happening in a country with the right of way. It's always sort of under the radar, there's it just happens, you see. But I think but again, I think if the use of the right of way is beneficial, yeah, with proper roadside tree planting, for instance, you have a good negotiation position. But I think also there's a reality where people have built houses and all these type of things, or they have some agriculture which is not conducive to the roads, and you need to get into a discussion. And I won't say that every discussion will be successful. I think we also need to acknowledge that. But if we don't start, then definitely nothing will happen.
Okay. Well, we have another question. So that's like, do we have experiences in areas which are totally flooded and or flooded regularly, also wetlands? Some areas in South Sudan are permanently flooded, for instance.
Yeah. No, it's also maybe my colleague David is here as well. He can put a link to the guideline that was already developed for the World Bank. Yes, we have experience. We have experience in Mozambique, for instance. So in these floodplain areas, yeah, and South Sudan is a massive floodplain, yeah, of the Upper Nile, and very challenging. So if you make roads in these areas, yeah, I think the first thing is really to not try to protect the road at any cost. Don't do it. This is a special case in these floodplains. So what I mean to say is this is what we saw in Mozambique. You make a road in a floodplain, you make a very high embankment, yeah. So what will happen? The river will flood, yeah, and the flood has to go somewhere. So it will breach somewhere, you know, where you don't know and you don't want it to breach, yeah. And then the road will be disrupted, etc., etc. So what also in some place in Mozambique was happening is rather in these floodplains, rather to make one huge high road, you know, make the road a bit lower, yeah, and have a controlled overflow area, yeah. So an area where when the water is high, you just, you know, accept, yeah, that the water will pass that section. You reinforce it, yeah, with vegetation, with special, you know, armoring, yeah, and you make sure that it goes to an area where you would like it to go. For instance, a wetland or a recharge area or area where, you know, has relatively little economic value. Yeah. And this has two benefits. One is, yeah, you deal with the challenge of flooding in these areas, but in a way that you know where it's going to go to the flood. And secondly, you can reduce a lot of costs, because if you try to build up a road in a floodplain area which sends up any floods, you have to make it maybe 100 meters high, yeah, because there will be a massive flood. So, you know, you can't do that, yeah. And you can save a lot of costs by making the road a bit lower and have controlled overflow areas in places like South Sudan and other, you know, big floodplains of rivers.
Great. Thanks, Frank. Well, the next question is relating to the toolkit. When will be made available online? So the toolkit, this Green Roads Toolkit is being launched in the Asia Pacific Transport Forum, which is going to be held in the week of 14th, from 14th to 17th of May. And after that, after the launch, it would be available online. But if Michael or anyone from the team can step in and add.
Yeah, I think they're the persons to answer.
Yeah, so thanks, Rito. Essentially, the tool will be available on the 16th of May. So that's the date for the launch. Actually, it's on the 14th of May. So the first day of the forum, that's the day's launch, and then it'll be available on the ADB website. Now, on the 16th of May, also during the forum, we will have a workshop here at ADB HQ to discuss the toolkit and get our hands dirty. So basically practical exercises on how you could actually use it for designing your own projects. So if you happen to be in Manila, please come to ADB, but then you have to register to attend the forum. So we'll show you later how to do that. Or even if you're not in Manila, please arrange to come. We'd love to see you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So the next question is, how effective is the concept of green roads in improving climate resilience of roads constructed in low-lying floodplains? So basically, we touched upon this in our previous question, but would you like to elaborate more? Or
Yeah, I think that it's very much related to the challenge posed in South Sudan, which I think is not unique to South Sudan, although South Sudan, yeah, is quite, you know, it's massive, the impact of the floodplains. So I think so. I think that's a large part of the answer. But another interesting practice for floodplain areas for people to look at is what's being done in Bangladesh, and these are called submersible roads. So these are roads which are underwater for part of the year, yeah, when it's the flood season, and then they're built in such a way that they don't, you know, wash away. That when the floods recede, they can also be used again. Of course, there might be some mud, etc., on the road, but they're not damaged. I mean, the design is such. What is also important, I think, in floodplain areas, because this link was made with climate resilience. Yeah? You know, floodplain areas globally, yeah, are among the most productive areas in principle for agriculture, because there's always water, basically. Yeah. So yes, they might be covered with water for part of the year, but when the floods recede, yeah, you know, there's moisture, yeah. And if you can retain that moisture, yeah, this is also what we're discussing with LGD on the whole areas in Bangladesh. If you can retain the moisture in these floodplains a bit longer, yeah, this is and you can do that with the roads, with like the submersible roads, some slightly elevated roads, so the water recedes but a bit slowed down. Then having this secure moisture a bit longer in the floodplains is really good for agriculture, for grazing in the floodplains, and sort of making use of this. And also in an area like South Sudan, where grazing is so important, yeah, to make sure that the floodplains are used, to the max.
Thank you. It seems we have been receiving a lot of questions, especially relating to the floods. So the first part of the question is similar to what we have responded, but I'll just go through the question, and the second part is yet to be responded. How do you prioritize the integration of water and land management into road development projects, especially in areas prone to natural disaster like floods or landslides? And the second part of the question is, what are some of the main challenges or barriers faced when trying to incorporate water and land management considerations into road development plans?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the second part we probably addressed already. It is we sometimes all sit in our own safe world, in our own bubble, and don't see the impact of what we do on others, or the impact of others on what we do ourselves. So in integrating this, I think it's just a matter of widening our perspective, and like I said, there's something to win in widening that perspective for everybody. Yeah. So and I think it will need some changes in the designs, in the budgets, etc., etc. If you take it to scale, I mean, on an individual level, it's already possible. The other part of the question was what to do in areas which are disaster prone. Yeah. So with roads. So I think there's three answers to that. I think first is to try to get the best practice, for such areas like soil bioengineering. There's several things you can do if you make roads in disaster prone areas, and that will make it better. But if you can't do that, sometimes you need to avoid the road going through that area. There's certain areas where, it's just very difficult, yeah, to make a road. So you have to select another trajectory, yeah, if you have the choice. The last thing on the link between disasters and roads, and that's also one of the elements in the toolkit, is that there's a case, yeah, to make roads more instrumental than is the current practice to disaster risk reduction and disaster preparedness. Yeah, I mentioned that often when there's a flood, the iconic pictures we see is people, standing on the road, because that's the only safe place that they can go to. Yeah, so there's a lot of things and it's also in the toolkit that we can do to make roads better equipped to deal with disasters. So in flooded areas, evacuation routes, safe shelters, but also to prevent the flood by, making sure that the runoff during a flood is retained a bit by the road so that the flood doesn't immediately peak, but it sort of is attenuated. But also with forest fires, there's a whole range of important practice for roads in forest areas to make sure that the roads separate forests so that the forest fire doesn't jump from one area to the other, and but also that fire trucks can have access, but also you don't want people who have ill intentions to have access. So I think that again, Yeah, so there are three things, try to do the good things, but avoid the impossible things, and then also deal with the disasters and use the roads as an instrument for disaster risk preparation. And I think in the ADB, Belinda Hewitt is really fantastic in this. There's a lot of great ideas.
Great. Thanks, Frank. This next question is again relating to South Sudan. We have kind of addressed it, but just going through it again. We are working in areas where there is very little to no slope with black cotton soil in South Sudan. Any advice, please?
Yeah. Honestly speaking, maybe for road engineers, black cotton soil doesn't say much, but they are the most difficult soils, and because they are sort of clays, and when it is dry, they're very dry and hardly any water gets into it. Yeah, and when it is wet, they swell up, and they block. So it's a really one of the difficult ones. So I would say that you should at least connect the drainage of these areas, the black cotton soils, with the road drainage as much as possible. Yeah, so that you can at least make sure the water is, not sort of unnecessarily obstructed by the road. Yeah, but I think it is one of the difficult challenges. Yeah, in agriculture, in water management, and also in infrastructure.
Great. The next question is, would like to understand further the use of vegetation, Bangladesh for green roads. Are edible plants used? Given that aside from green roads, non-EVs are still being used there, looking at it holistically, the safety of agriculture for consumption.
Yeah. Okay. I think if we go for planting roadside vegetation, there are several elements to it. Yeah? And we need to all take them all into account, particularly looking at the local priority and, the landscape, the economy, the road itself. So I think in the roadside vegetation, the first thing is also road safety. Yeah. You don't want, accidents where people hit a tree along the road. Yeah. But on the other hand, also, trees along the roads can help in the road safety because they can improve the visibility, of the road. Yeah. But there are certain sections where, vegetation could, block the visibility, or, areas which are prone for cars to go out. You don't want them to hit the road. So the first is the road safety. Even a very interesting example on vegetation is something that is used but not so common. Yeah, but I've seen it that in certain areas where people tend to drive too fast. Yeah, it's really fascinating. You put trees along the roads. Yeah, but you put the distance between the trees, normally you put it every 8 meters or every 10 meters or every 6 meters. So what you do is you sort of jumble it up. So the first road, tree A to tree 2, it may be the distance is 6 meters. The next one is 9 meters. The next one is 7 meters. The next one is, yeah. So people can't, measure their speed. Yeah. So they have a less tendency to speed up because, they're a bit unsecure about the speed of their car. Yes, you see what I mean? So that's like almost an optical game that is being played by the distance between the trees. And so that's one thing, road safety. The other one is productive use. Yeah. So again, it is part of the things. There's a lot of opportunities to plant trees which have productive use. It can be fruits, it can be non-timber products, it can be timber, all sort of things. So again, every area has its own specific thing. The other side with roadside vegetation, for instance, the import on biodiversity, because often the road verges, for instance, in my country, the Netherlands, most of our agricultural land is very much industrialized, yeah. But along the roads, actually, we still have the wild vegetation, and of course, it is a little bit sort of protected and managed by the authorities, yeah. But you see much more plant biodiversity along the road verges than in the agriculture areas. So, but also you can improve the biodiversity by connecting the roadside vegetation, for instance, with hedges which run through the landscape so that they are part of a whole green corridors, yeah. So that's another one. Dust, for instance, yeah. If areas which are prone to dust, you should plant your trees in such a way that they capture the dust, that the dust doesn't sort of get blocked by the vegetation and sort of moves up and moves down, yeah. So again, that's another consideration. So what I think with roadside vegetations, and it's also in the toolkit, you need to balance all the different functions, that are beneficial in a clever way. Yeah, you need to know, okay, what does it mean for the dust? Maybe dust is not an issue, but but if it's an issue, then you do these and these things. Biodiversity, you need to, understand the landscape a bit. And again, all these things are not rocket science. They're more like, how do you call it? Yeah, proper knowledge that, we in the Netherlands we call it farmers knowledge, and something that we all should know if we just keep our eyes open.
Yeah, and that should be like custom tailored based on local needs.
For sure, yeah. But I think that once you start working on it, you can only do it right or better. Maybe not perfect, but you can make big gains.
Yeah. So we have one question relating to Nepal. Regarding road construction, there is no integrated approach. Water supply, telecommunication, and electricity departments work on their own schedule. There is no proper coordination. Do you have successful example of governance in low to middle income countries on road construction?
Yeah, I think in some countries they do this more systematically. Some middle income countries where when you have to sort of announce, yeah, to all the other related departments that you're going to do this work. So it's very much a matter of communication, coordination, but it is a big issue. Yeah, we all know this. Road is built and then it's sort of opened up because some telephone lines had to be put in, or some sewer lines, or yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, I in the toolbox we have some examples of where this is being done. Yeah.
Wait, we have still some questions coming up. So I think we will take all the questions till 3:30, and then we will close the session. I have 3 more questions in this Q&A box, so I'll go through them. And if there's a comment, an effective way to incorporate water and land management in road construction is to engage the communities in all the project cycle. This works very well in Kenya. The community must be seen as the key stakeholders in the implementation of green roads for water practices. I think that's very true, say.
Yeah, I say fully agree. Yes, but I think it's also what shall I say? No, it is definitely something that needs to be a common practice, because if you don't engage, then sometimes the problem comes back at you because people are very unhappy with the road construction and they might not allow the contractor to work, or so so I think it's also a wise thing. And on the other hand, also it's good to be practical, because there's always a risk in the word community. So who's the community? Maybe Rita and you, we are a community, or not, So it's also good to, where possible, to do this in a representative way. Yeah, not just sort of the people who sit on a little tea shop along the road, yeah. But to organize it properly. But then I think the benefits are always very large. Yeah.
Thanks, Frank. So the next question is relating to the funding. It is the best option, but are there any funds available for road agency to implement these intervention measures?
Yeah, I think that some road agencies have incorporated now like 5% or 3% and this sort of 10% of budget for these measures. And I think often it's not only about the funds being available, but also a little bit the flexibility in how you spend it. Because some of these measures are relatively small and easy to do, but you need to know where to do what, basically. So you cannot plan that always totally in advance, yeah, of your road investments. You need to have the funds, but also have the flexibility that they can be used, during or after the construction, depending on the needs of the people around the roads and the opportunities they see.
Okay, thank you, Frank. So the next question is, what are the best ways and strategies to harvest and reuse water for drinking and vegetation purposes from your experience, especially if you have encountered previous cases in places like refugee camps and settlements?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a big difference whether you reuse or you use the water which is generated around the roads for vegetation or for drinking water. Vegetation is relatively easy in the sense that the harmful effects are not so high, because in fact often what you do, that's some toolbox on pollution, you plant vegetation and even water bodies along the roads to neutralize the pollution from the roads. So if you want to use it for drinking water, I think then of course you need to make sure the water is properly treated, yeah, and has this sort of minimum required water quality standards. I've once seen an area in Italy where basically, very interestingly, they use the borrow pit. Yeah, this is also an important one I didn't mention in the presentation, but when we construct roads, we take the material, and that borrow pit can also be a storage reservoir. So in this case, in Italy, an old borrow pit, which was fed by water from the road still, was used as a wetlands, and it was what they call a treated wetland. So they planted certain, reeds, etc., which really improved the water quality. And then they only need to do some very light treatment to make it ready for drinking water. So there are such examples, but of course, with you need to make sure that people don't drink untreated water, which has a harmful contaminants. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Frank. I see we have no more questions in the Q&A box, and it's about to be 1.5 hours as well. So I think we need to end this Q&A session now, and maybe I'll request Frank to put this slide for the ASEAN Pacific Transport Forum.
Yeah.
Sorry, to Mark. Yeah.
Mark, yeah.
Thanks, Mark. So just announcement and this Asia and Pacific Transport Forum 2024, which is a flagship event of ADB, is going to be held in Manila from 14th to 17th of May. Together with the panelists, there will be a lot of knowledge event sessions, trainings relating to Green Road Toolkit, as well as several other topics. So please register and try to join this forum. That's what I have to say. So Mark, can you, is there any guidance on how to register in this forum? Maybe, well, in the chat box, you can see the link to the forum, and you can just go through the link and register yourself. So that's all. And for this Green Road webinar series, we will take a pause until this forum, and it will resume after the forum is completed, after 17th of May. So we will be providing announcement with when is it going to be resumed, maybe in couple of weeks. So stay tuned. With this, I would like to thank all of our participants for the very interesting questions and making this series a very engaging one. And a big thanks to our presenter, Frank. Very insightful presentation and very good to know the impactful solutions. And to everyone who helped in facilitating this webinar, thank you very much. With this, we'll close this session. Thank you. Bye-bye.